All right, Ken. So we're talking about the Jumpstart program. I really love this program. It's an outdoor feel style program. So tell us a little bit about how the Jumpstart program came to be, because we didn't always used to have this program. It's a relatively in the 75-year history of our camp, a new program. So how did we decide that like the sixth graders needed their own special program?
Well, I think it's probably 60 years of history with fourth through sixth graders being the junior camp.
Right, right.
And actually, there were two speakers. One of them was Uncle Charlie from the Children's Bible Hour,
Hmm.
who actually, just a little bit of history, he gave his life to the Lord to serve in ministry in 1949, the very first summer that we had camp here at Lake Ann, right here at Lake Ann.
Wow, that's cool.
And the rest of that is history. I mean, here's a guy that just impacted millions of people through his,
Yeah, I remember listening to on the radio for
yeah.
years. Yeah.
And then the other speaker was Kurt Albert. And Kurt's dad actually came in 1950 and was a camper and then a staff member and then a pastor in the state. And anyway, those were the two speakers that were just classic junior speakers, and they would come and speak year after year. And one year, Uncle Charlie came to me and he said, "You know, Ken, I can point out every sixth grader in the crowd when I'm speaking because the fourth and fifth graders are sitting on the edge of their seats and I'm doing my illusions and my ventriloquism and puppets and telling stories. And the fourth and fifth graders are just eating it up. And the sixth graders are rolling their eyes like this is so kid stuff."
Yeah.
And he says, "You're not reaching the sixth graders." Well, that was a trigger for me. And then Kurt Albert told me the exact same thing. And Kurt was a regular speaker for our junior camp. And so we thought, we've already franchised the ninth grade Fresh Start
Mhm.
program, and that was very successful. We know how to do this. We just need to put together a program. So I set out to try to figure out how do you reach sixth graders. And my director of Fresh Start was Brian Bro.
Yeah.
And Brian taught sixth graders all year long in Denver, Colorado. And then he'd come here for the summer and lead our ninth grade program. And he told me, if you're going to build a program for sixth graders, you got to use me because I live with sixth graders all year long. And so Brian and I put our heads together, and that was the beginning of Jumpstart.
So Jumpstart is kind of separated from camp in a sense that it's not in the main part of camp, but there's some pretty cool places they stay. So you want to talk about where they stay at Jumpstart?
Oh, there's so much for this program to talk about, but yeah, we wanted it to be really unique, and we thought of this idea of sort of a Robinson Crusoe tree fort
Hmm.
concept. And my maintenance director, Phil Bolthouse, had seen a camp down south, southern Michigan, that had these little tree forts, and so we talked to them and got the plans for them, and it's kind of an interesting story because we wanted to build these. We'd already told people we were going to have a sixth grade camp, and I think the first week in April when the snow had melted, actually they still cut some of the snow out so that they could build the pilings to build them on. And a group of volunteers got together the first week of April, and I think that year the first day of camp was the 13th of June,
Hmm.
and we had all six cabins built by volunteers in that period from April, the first of week of April till the middle of June, and we kicked it off.
That's fantastic. So all the time at camp, we try to introduce campers to nature, to the wild. We do, sleeping under the stars. We see, nature walks and things like that happening. But Jumpstart takes that maybe to even to the next level. So kind of explain some of the things that we do in Jumpstart that are unique to the program.
Well, every program wants to build on the previous program and be a sort of a greater step of growth so that the junior camp is great for elementary junior campers, but the sixth grade camp wanted to be a step further. You have to go back in our history to 1980. Ray Gates
Mhm.
was a biology professor at Cornerstone University, Grand Rapids Baptist at that time, and he came up and helped us to develop an outdoor ed program, and it was called Teepee Village.
Mhm.
And campers at Teepee Village loved it. They had all kinds of outdoor activities. We're trying to teach about Christ through creation, and when Fresh Start came along, we needed a place for fresh starters, and so we kind of took over the Teepee Village area. And so I took the TP Village program and brought it down to the junior high camp, and we were doing outdoor ed programs for junior hires. One of those activities is the bog, which is sort of a classic Lake Ann activity. And you have 1,000 junior hires, and you have 1,000 junior hires in the bog, and they just started tearing it up because there's just so much wear and tear. So we built a boardwalk out there. But as we were trying to figure out, what do we do that's unique for the sixth graders, we thought, a sixth grader is not as concerned about their makeup and their hair as a seventh and eighth grader, particularly the girls. So we thought, they're kind of in the in between stage of being a child and growing into their adult life, and they're a little bit more reticent to be able to do activities like that. So we thought, well, let's explore bringing these outdoor ed programs to the sixth grade camp and making that the whole focus of the out of chapel experience. And that's where, if you actually look at the schedule today and you go back to the schedule back in the early 1980s of TP Village, Jumpstart is really the TP Village program.
Yeah. So let's talk about the bog a little bit, because it is a very unique uh, concept that only really, as far as I know, Northern Michigan has and is part of. So explain the bog a little bit. So what are they going to get to do when they go to the bog?
Well, we want it to be an immersive experience, and that's where you don't just go and hear a lecture, but you actually get in and you experience it.
Truly immersive.
Truly immersive experience, exactly. And so the campers, we talk about a bog is different than a swamp. A swamp is where water overtakes land. A bog is just the opposite. It's where land overtakes water. So you look at the little body of water in the middle of the bog, probably 600 or 1,000 years ago. That was just a beautiful lake in the northern Michigan that was cut out by the glaciers. And because there's high sides, we always talk about the bog. You go down, 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 because it's always in a low area. And so as the rains and things would flush the forest down into that pond. Over time, the peat moss would start growing, and eventually the land overtakes takes the water, and that's what a bog is, and they actually get right down in there. It's a very interesting ecosystem because it's the only ecosystem in Michigan where you have three plants that actually eat bugs. And the question is, why do they do that? Well, it's because there's not enough nutrients in a bog for plants to sustain themselves, and so they get those nutrients from the bugs that they eat. So you have the pitcher plant that looks like a water pitcher. It actually holds water, and the bugs go down into it because of the smell of the plant, and then they get trapped in the water, and then it gets the nutrients from that. The sundew is sort of a sticky flower, and a bug gets in it, and it just closes up kind of like a Venus flytrap. And then there's a bladderwort as well. Not as common in our bog, but we do have it. So there's three different types of plants that eat bugs, which I think sixth graders think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So one of the things that I love that they do at the very beginning of going down to the bog is just kind of being in tune with your senses. And so they talk about the five senses, and it's a silent walk down to the boardwalk down by the bog. And what we've done in the past is hidden things along the trail, and we want them to count as many of those things as possible. And then when we get down to the bottom, say, well, how many have you counted? And most of them are, 40, 50 or so, but we've hidden 500 or 600 of these different, I'll let the Jumpstart directors call them that, and I'll keep that a surprise.
Yeah.
But it just shows how camouflage works, how God created the different animals to kind of sustain and be in that environment, and we would never see them. And I think that's what Jumpstart really is all about, is kind of seeing that other side of things.
Yeah, we in America pretty much go from point A to point B,
Right.
and we're more interested in getting to point B, and we miss all of the things in between. I had a friend from Washington D.C., and they brought their kids to Lake Ann, and they said the whole time that they were driving from Virginia to here, it was like, oh, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? This is so boring. How long is this going to take? And they said on the way home, they were noticing birds and flowers and all kinds of different things. And they said it was a totally different experience. And they said, how did you do that? I said, well, we showed them all the things that are around them that they normally miss.
Right.
And they said it just transformed every experience that they had with their child from that point on. And that was just a small part. I mean, it wasn't one of the big teachable moments, but it
Right.
was definitely one of the outcomes
Yeah.
of the program.
I love that. So every program that we've highlighted, we talk about the theme of that program,
Mhm.
and the theme for sixth graders, I think, is really, really important, and that is the confidence to make those right choices. Can you
Yeah.
talk about how we came to that decision to do that for that theme?
Yeah, again, going back to Brian Bro, Brian was saying, you've got sixth graders that are 12-year-olds that'll soon be teenagers.
Mhm.
And when you become a teenager, there's a lot of things thrown at you, and you have to make a decision about what is right and what is not right. And we decided that Chapel wants to be a character sketch of people in the Bible that made poor choices and had poor consequences, and people that made great choices and had great
Mhm.
consequences. So every chapel is designed to be a character sketch, teaching principles that would help young people to make right choices. And I think one of my funnest stories about this, I was doing a tram tour, and a dad came up to me afterwards, says, "Can I talk to you privately?" And I'm like, "Okay, what's this going to be about?" And he pulls me aside and he says, "My daughter was in sixth grade this year. He said she went to Jumpstart last year. In the middle of the school year, one of her friends brought some alcohol and wanted her to try it. She didn't try it. The friend got caught. The friend got expelled. And his daughter came home just traumatized at the end
Mhm.
of the school day. And he's like, "Honey, what happened?" And she told the whole story. And so after listening to the story, we asked her, "So when your friend brought you something, why didn't you try it?" And she just kind of jumped back and said, "Well, Dad, it takes courage to make right choices." And he's like, "Well,
Clearly,
yeah, absolutely." I was like, "Well, so where'd you learn that?" "Well, at Jumpstart." And so he said, "I want you to know, you helped save my daughter from
mm,
making a bad decision." And somebody asked me years ago, "Why do you continue doing what you're doing?" And I told him, I really love helping young people live a life with no regret.
mm,
Even David talked about how, Lord, don't remember the sins of my youth.
mm,
And a lot of our campers will come and make decisions and determinations that will impact the rest of their life and that may keep them from a life of regret, sins of the youth. And what a privilege to be a
yeah.
part of that.
Yeah. So let's talk about chapel a little bit. You mentioned it before, but chapel is not like any other chapel that we do here. It's an outdoor setting, similar to Fresh Start, where we have the Pine Chapel. But the chapel experience is something to behold as well. So talk a little bit about chapel.
Well, you stand on the platforms of the tents or the tamarack
Mhm.
cabins, and they're on stilts, and you can look through the forest in the wintertime when the leaves are off the tree, and you can see this beautiful amphitheater right in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
So as the speaker is unfolding the Word of God, they're sitting in God's creation.
Yeah.
And I love in Romans 1, it talks about the invisible things of God from the creation of the world are clearly seen,
Mm.
being understood by the things that are made. And that it goes on and says that leaves man with no excuse. And
Yeah.
so when you're talking about a God of order and a God of design, they're sitting in the beauty of the design of God, and they're learning the principles of God's word. And what a great thing that is.
Yeah. I love watching campers come in at the beginning of the week, and then by the end of the week, like you said before in your story before, them just kind of seeing the world in a whole new light as they're looking and seeing different, even just blades of grass. Like this is a different kind of blade. Or as we identify pine trees, there's different pine trees out here, and
Mhm.
how we know one is different than the other, and just all those kinds of things that are being taught through that program.
Yeah, I mean, even in that area, there's the tamarack trees. Well, tamarack trees are in the bog, but in the area where the chapel is, there's a popple trees, and just the cycle of the forest. And they're going to teach the campers about the cycle of the forest. But there's a 400-year cycle in the
Hmm.
Michigan forest, and if you clear cut land in Michigan, the first tree that grows up is the popple tree, and it grows up through the roots. It doesn't have a seed like an oak tree
Hmm.
or a maple tree. And so if you cut a tree down, the roots will then send up shoots, and that'll cover the ground so that the ground doesn't, so you don't have an erosion problem. And so kind of a weed tree. It grows for like 40 years or 50 years. And the oak trees and the maple trees and even the white pine trees, which is the king of the forest in Michigan, like to grow up in shade. So they grow up in the shade of the popple tree. And one of the things we talk about with them is every tree, if the wind blows, it kind of goes like
Hmm.
this. But the popple tree, when the wind blows, it's like it's on a hinge, and the leaves wiggle like this, letting light through.
Yeah.
Because God's a God of order and design. So he created this design so that you take care of the erosion, and then from there you have a perfect environment for the hardwoods to grow up, and eventually the white pines will tower over the hardwoods and take over the forest, which is what Michigan forests were before the Chicago fire,
Right.
when they logged off our area back in the early 1900s.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up this episode of the Jumpstart program, what is maybe one thing that you've kind of seen over the years that has been maybe the biggest impact for you that you've seen, and why this program is so important to Lake Canyon?
I think one of the interesting things, we wanted to develop programs that the campers would come back to, and it would be worth it to come back to. My first summer, we had 750 juniors, 250 junior hires, and 68 high schoolers. And Eldon Brock, the director before me, said, I think the reason why they're not continuing with us is there's nothing to come back to. And so, in developing unique programs for the specifics of each age level, we created a program that made them want to come back. So we have more fifth graders than fourth graders, more sixth graders than fifth graders. The sixth graders that have a great experience the whole week, we're saying, hey, this is great, but next year,
Wait.
junior high,
Yeah.
and there's something, there's more that they can do in junior high all the way up through high school. And so right now, 53% of our campers are high schoolers, but it all starts in those junior campers and those jump starters, and what a privilege to be a part of their lives.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, getting just an inside peek into the Jumpstart program. We cannot wait. We are, at the time of this recording, 46 days away from summer camp, so super excited. We cannot wait for the campers to get here. Talk to you later.